The images of Islam that many people have are based on what's happening in the world at the present time. If we look at things from a historical perspective, what can we learn about Islam in terms of peace and coexistence? What are some of the lessons that history teaches us?
I appreciate the question. I think it's a profound one. And just to be honest and clear about it, imagine somebody reduces the whole teaching and history of Judaism to some of the extreme elements that would like to see the Palestinians as people disappear totally from Palestine. Imagine reducing the entire history of Christianity. Not that there have been positive and negative among people or those who call themselves Christian. Reduce it all to the Crusades or the Inquisition, and that's all about we know about Christianity. The same thing. Imagine reducing a 14th century history of Islam to just the recent, whether we talk about post 9/11 or shortly before that, the whole history of Islam is just capsulized on this. I don't think that, in terms of even intellectual honesty, that this is a good approach. No person from any faith community or non-faith community, even on national ground, reduced the history of his nation or his faith into one particular selective part where there is weakness, where there is problem, or where there is violence. And that's why I consider your question very essential. The images portrayed by the media about Islam and Muslims, that they are nothing but violent people and their violence is based on their scripture, which you have shown, is totally false. But even though I did say honestly and clearly earlier that actions of Muslims cannot be justified because they claim to be Muslims unless it, unless it abides by the rule of the Qur'an and Sunnah, the teaching of the Qur'an and the teaching of the Prophet. Even having said that much, I said even comparison in relative terms over 1400 years, you find that there have been extended period of time where Muslims actually gave example to the whole world of peaceful coexistence. I'm not saying they were perfect. There have been points of deviation. But overall, example, in the 8th century, in Baghdad, which is now the capital of Iraq, the Caliph al-Ma'mun, under his sponsorship, he established what is called Bayt al-Hikmah, literally meaning the house of wisdom. It was in that huge research institution that Muslims, Jews, Christian, Magians, people irrespective, all scholars available, irrespective of their religious or national background, were working together, hand in hand, as many historians admit, not only to preserve the great classics, but to have creative and innovative ideas also that benefited humanity, and many admit were contributing factors to the European Renaissance. You take example of Spain under Muslim rule. Again, Muslims were not perfect, but look at the lengthy period of time where Cordoba and other major cities in Spain became, as some historians call them, the light of Europe. The light of Europe, where scientists who were persecuted elsewhere were flocking to learn sciences and humanities and philosophy from Muslim and other scholars, where everybody, again, like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, were working hand in hand, Muslim, Jews, Christians, and others, for the benefit and the prosperity of the whole society. And in fact, Muslims were the jewel of Europe at the time, and far advanced even than many parts of Europe because of that cooperation and putting hand in hand. Where in history do we find a majority Muslims under one ruler in Spain, where a Jewish rabbi became the prime minister, let alone many periods of time where some Jews or Christians occupied high positions in the state? Some historians say that some Muslim majority even complained that the non-Muslim minorities are getting much more than their fair share even of influence and high position in the state. Again, I'm not saying Muslims were totally perfect. There were periods also which did not abide by these rules. But if you take these 14 centuries, Muslims did live in peace with one another. Take the most hot issue in the world today that might be behind the backdrop of radicalism or radicalization and violence, and that is the issue of the rights of the Palestinian people. I am told by elderly Palestinians that until much later in the in the 20th century, Muslims, Christians, and a small number of Jews who were living still in Palestine were living in relative harmony, much more harmony than you can expect even between these three groups. It is only after the usurpation of the rights of Palestinians that, of course, you get this kind of conflict that has risen. But they did live in peace for ages. In fact, I heard a Jewish scholar, Lilienthal, when he said that even after the Holocaust in Europe, those small numbers of immigrants who came to the Muslim world, especially the Arab world, they say they were welcomed as the cousins of Muslims, but not when it was found that there is a political ideology, Zionism, of dispossessing the Palestinians, that the conflict began to arise. So prior to that, they were seeking protection under Muslim rule. During the Ottoman Empire, that's sometimes much more maligned than needed, Jews found a refuge under Muslim rule. When the Crusades took place, it victimized both Muslims and Jews. So they were sharing actually some of these issues and suffering together. So if you're talking about examples of tolerance, even acceptance, they are immense. And some fair Western historians say that the Muslims perhaps have been the most tolerant and respectful towards the rights of. I give you an example even that continues until this day. Islamic law allows any religious minority in the matter of personal law, like marriage, divorce, custody of children, inheritance, to go to their own court, which is different from the law of the land. In Egypt, there are 10% Christians. And from the time of the spread of Islam in Egypt until today, Christians in Egypt can go to their own religious courts, even though it's different. That's a right that many religious minorities, like Jews and Muslims, for example, in the most democratic, liberal countries in the world, do not have, because you have to go through, for example, in the matter of divorce, through the courts. So what more in terms of theory and, again, a good degree of practice on the part of Muslims? But if you reduce history only to one positive thing, or history only to one negative thing, obviously it is a very biased pick and choose. Muslims had tremendous influence and impact, and I can quote you various Western historians. One of them actually says that had it not been for that new spirit of research based on objectivity, seeking evidence, experimental approach introduced by early Muslim scholars, the European Renaissance would have not arisen or could have been delayed by centuries. But unfortunately, immense Muslim contributions seem to have been put out of sight or belittled, and all the focus now on the period of turmoil and the mistakes committed in the context of that turmoil.